Today, the talk is based on Mr. Ottavio's personal experience as a frontline practitioner teaching children English as a second language in a low immersion environment. And we are going to hear the insights he gained from overcoming those challenges he faced that may be useful for you new teachers. So the title of today's talk is A Story of Teaching English to Young Children in Czech Republic, Pain and Gain. We are really fortunate to hear what he actually experienced and share with us. What does he think of those challenges and the opportunities? So I now hand over to Mr. Ottavio.
Good morning to you. Well, so first of all, good morning to you in Hong Kong and good evening to me and to some of the students who will be joining this talk today from Mexico. Thank you so much, Ms. Lee, for this great opportunity of sharing with your students and with your university. I hope that this talk will be beneficial for all of you. And it's such a pleasure for me to be contributing to the learning of new teachers and future teachers in early childhood education. Myself, I work here as a trainer and a teacher also of English at in some of the departments of education and the school where I work in the university. It's only a university for teachers as well, so it's very similar to yours. And well, as Professor Lee said earlier, I would like to share my experience in the Czech Republic. Now I'm a professional trainer, but I used to be a practitioner as well. This time was back in 2016 when I was studying my master's degree in the Czech Republic in Europe. And well, as part of my program, my master's degree program, I had to experience firsthand what was it like to teach English. I had, of course, already taught English, but I had always been in my country. So that been said is Mexico, or I was in France where I knew the mother tongue of the students. So I also speak French, English, and Spanish. So teaching Spanish to French students wasn't that different. The situation here is that when I went to this school in the Czech Republic in Prague, the capital, I was given the challenge to teach not only English, but also doing it, besides from teaching English, I had to teach English using a specific methodology, which is called CLIL. I'm going to talk very briefly about it, and then I'm going to jump into more details. Of course, you don't need to understand what CLIL is 100%, but it's just one of many possibilities in the world of language teaching. So you may be wondering, what is CLIL? It stands for Content and Language Integrated Learning. This refers to teaching subjects such as science, history, geography for students of other languages. The difference, there's one methodology that is EMI, which is English as a means of instruction, in which many courses, especially at university levels, are taught in English only in order for the students to acquire the content. In this case, CLIL is a little bit different since there are two objectives. Objective number one is for the students to learn and practice the language with all the grammar and vocabulary and all that. But also there's a second objective, which is the subject-specific objective. That is that the students also need to learn about some of the situations. So in my case, these are some of the subjects that were taught in that elementary school where I was placed. And in my case, I was working mainly with science and arts. I will tell you why I decided to teach these ones. This school specifically had, it was an elementary school, but they also had some kindergarten students. So it was like year 3 in kindergarten. They have 3 years in kindergarten. So it was K3, the third level, where I was working with some of the students. And we carried out some interesting activities. It was my first time working with very young children. And the difficulty here, of course, the first difficulty was that I didn't speak any Czech at all. So my students spoke Czech, that's the language, of course, in the Czech Republic. My mother tongue is Spanish, I speak French, I speak English, but none of these three languages are similar whatsoever to Czech. So I had a huge challenge because I used to be with helping teachers before, but this time I was giving one class to myself to teach the subjects or to teach the language or to interact with the little kids. And I didn't know any Czech at all. So that's the first difficulty that I faced. But thanks to that, I think I learned so much from that experience, because now if I want to create, let's say, an immersion situation for my students, it is possible because I have that experience. So I knew that the only way of communication between my students in the Czech Republic and myself was English. So I'll tell you a little bit about how it all went. So some of the limitations, I'm gonna list them here. The age, of course, first time teaching little kids, their level in the second language of English. So they were in kindergarten year 3 or first year of elementary school. So it was sort of complicated. I was also teaching second grade in elementary, but still they didn't know much English. Another problem that we may face is anxiety. I'm pretty sure that you as English learners have experienced anxiety when you have to speak, when you have to communicate. So believe me, these little kids, they also have anxiety levels when they try to speak. But of course, this is one of the benefits, because adults are more aware, or they worry more about making mistakes when communicating, whereas little kids don't worry so much about it, but there is anxiety within. And of course, you may know this, when you're working with kindergarten students or little children in early years in education, their attention span is very short. So you have to be creating new activities all the time to keep them interested in the lesson that you're teaching. So let me give you an example. This is a task, a project that my students had to come up with. I planned the whole thing, and the objective was for the students to understand that some products, some food that we eat, it comes from a plant, but there are some other foods that come from animals. So you may think that that's easy, right? As you can see, some of them that were already writing. So they have what's like banana, oranges, bread. But we tried this same experiment, the same thing, giving cutouts to little kids. So there was the picture of cheese, the picture of milk, the picture of bread. So we gave them to the students those pictures. I don't have that evidence here, but it happened. And I had to make them think where to place those objects. So as a plant origin or animal origin. And the interesting thing happens when, for example, one student sees cereal or bread, and he can decide whether bread comes from an animal or a plant. And I wanted to explain, of course, that we process the seeds, that we process the eggs and everything. We put it together and we make bread. But I couldn't do it because I didn't speak the language. So I started using all this body language, and I started scratching my hair, and the little kid's just looking at me. And of course, he's not understanding, and I don't understand. And now I can tell you one thing in Czech, nerozumím. Nerozumím in Czech means I don't understand. So that's the only thing I learned in Czech, to tell my students that I didn't understand them because they didn't understand me. So what we can learn from this experience is that there are so many other resources, if we want to go through immersion, that we can take advantage of in order for students to understand the grammar, the vocabulary, and whatever we want to teach them, in this case, content. So what are those situations? Well, I'm going to tell you in a minute. This is a picture of me doing some singing and dancing with the kids. Of course, I had to use a diagram so you wouldn't see the faces of the little kids, but you can see them there, replicating, reproducing what I was doing. So in order for me to understand how to do the things, I was doing self-observation. So I was observing my own lessons, but I also went to observe Czech teachers. So on one side, you can see that, excuse me, the Czech teachers, I sat down at the back of the classroom, and I started looking at a teacher and see how their classes go when they teach. I wanted to see if they use the mother tongue, Czech, L1, or if they just taught their whole lessons in English, but because they knew how to speak Czech. So maybe they were using some Czech, and yes, it happened. When the time came to give instructions, the teachers, the Czech teachers, would change to, excuse me, they would change to their mother tongue and use it to clarify, to give definitions, to give instructions. Why? Because as you can see on the other hand, and this part of the circle, the instruction process for me was longer. Of course, I was trying to explain as much as I could and try to give simple instructions, very well intended, short, very well spoken. But anyway, I had to basically act the whole thing so the students would understand. And I was modeling, and I was performing, and I was using my body, and I was using my hands and the board to make it clear. So the instruction process was longer for me, whereas the other teachers would just switch to their mother tongue and continue with the activities. What happens when the students, as I said before, they are asking you questions? Well, maybe they won't get an answer because first of all, you don't understand the question. Second of all, they don't understand you because they don't have enough English. So this is the thing that we get here. I noticed that I was using lots of visuals and body language. But at the end of the day, both the Czech teacher and myself, we achieved what we wanted to do with that lesson. So it is possible. This is just a very short questionnaire I gave my students after the lessons, the very, very young ones. They were written in Czech. They didn't know how to read yet. So one Czech teacher was reading the questions in Czech for them, and they were completing the answers. Just for me, first of all, to know if they were anxious, if it was complicated, but also if they liked it. So I'm gonna focus on the first graph. And the yellow graph is for the first grade and the second grade is blue. We didn't do this with the kindergarten students because I didn't have a teacher to help me do the questionnaire and I didn't speak Czech. So it was a big, big problem. But first grade is sort of close to 5-year-olds, 4-year-olds, just a little bit, right? So they like it, and first grade, not so much. Second grade, they like it much. Because I understand that it was because I didn't speak Czech. But there was a question that said, what do you do when you don't understand? So I was asking this question to those students. And 3 of those students agreed on this same response. I asked somebody, I asked a friend, and I asked a classmate. So they were asking people who knew, people who understood. So I could continue because those little kids were working as translators. So here is something we're going to point out later. And there was these very interesting answers. This one right here says, I pull out a hair. So I pull out a hair or do nothing. And the other one is I slap myself and do nothing. That was worrying. That was really worrying to hear these little kids saying that they were so frustrated that they will pull their hairs or slap themselves. That is concerning. So based on this, what are my recommendations? You can see a picture of me. I wanted to use this picture because I think I'm very, after 10 years of teaching, I think I've become so aware of the need of body language that I'm always moving my hands and I'm making faces. And so the students understand what I'm saying when I'm trying to do immersion with my students. So this is why I wanted to include this picture. So first of all, I think the most important thing that we can learn from this experience is that you need to employ a lot of visual material and online resources. There are so many concepts that can be illustrated with just a picture, with a photo, then the students will understand and make that connection between the meaning and the object, that it becomes natural. So if you can bring as much visual materials into your classroom, that is a thing that is going to help you a lot. Now, some of you were asking what to do, whether just to use English or just to use the mother tongue of the students. Well, it's natural for beginners or for any year. It's so natural to code switch. That means to speak in your mother tongue when you are learning English. That's very natural, and I think we need to allow it because, as we saw before, some students may find answers with their classmates. So that's why they are code switching to understand the instructions. They talk to other people and speak. Say, for example, here in Mexico, I hear my students speak in Spanish, and I sometimes go, please speak English. That's what we want to avoid. We want our students to, of course, take advantage of the time and practice English. But we should not forget that the mother tongue of the students, it's a very important tool that we can use in our advantage. Also, as I said, use advanced students as resources or translators, so they can always help you with the low performance students. Add visuals, and I intended to put the word or the phrase add visuals because, as I said, it's to me one of the most important things that you can do to help you carry out with immersion. And use the internet. There are some times when we want to use realia, we want to use pictures, but we don't have, because they're very concrete objects. Say, for example, I want to tell my students what a pig is, or a dog, a cow. Of course, I can bring a picture, but what if I want to talk about love, or I want to talk about life, something more complicated, or a house? Of course, you can always go, use the internet, and find a picture, find a video, find something that will help the students understand what the word is when it's very abstract. Visuals again. So I put it, and I did it in purpose, so we don't forget how important they are in our classrooms, especially with little kids. Include body language. Use your hands or body. Use people. Realia. Bring objects. Bring fruit, vegetables. Use videos. And here I want to take a moment to answer a question of someone who was concerned about the accent. I would say don't worry about the accent. We all have one. That's our presentation card. So don't you worry if you don't know all the English that there is. Don't worry if you don't know how to, if your accent is heavy and then you imprint it to the words. Something we should pay attention to, though, is to always, especially with little kids, because they absorb everything we tell them and they believe what we say. So before, if you're not sure of how to pronounce a word, that's different from an accent. If you don't know how to pronounce a word correctly, look it up. Make sure that you're teaching the correct pronunciation, because it's our responsibility. Or if you don't have it, as I said, use the internet. There are so many tools now. You can just click on the icon and it will produce it for you. It's okay. We are not paid in dollars. We don't know all the language in the world. So we can use any resources that are available for us. And another recommendation I would give you in order for you to cope with the attention span of the little kids is learn some attention getters. If you don't know what attention getters are, just go and look it up in the internet. It's these things that you do to call your students' attention, so they're paying attention to you. They tend to be fun. They tend to be appealing, short, and you can learn them. You can watch videos on how to use attention getters, or you can find very interesting attention getters on the internet, as I said. And it's very important to teach this attention getter to your students at the beginning of the lesson, during the first lessons, so they know it. That will help us get the students' attention every time we need it. And something you need to know about attention getters is that they expire. So we need to have a list. We need to have a set of attention getters in order for us to use them whenever we need them. And that's it. I hope that this is correct, and that means thank you and not something else. And now I think I'm open to questions.
Thanks very much, Octavia. Actually, you have addressed quite a lot of the questions that we sent you before. Yeah. From your experience of teaching children in the Czechs, are there any differences in teaching children in Czech and in Mexico? Are there much difference or very similar?
Very good question. Actually, I was looking at that as one of the first in the first pack of questions that I think I didn't answer in this presentation. And well, I think we need to understand first that yes, of course, education is different in every country. I think that the teaching of foreign languages is sort of similar in all the countries, but there are some generalities when we teach in a specific country. Let me give you an example. In Mexico, in my experience, the teachers tend to be very close to their students. They are there to help them, protect them, and the students want to be with their teachers all the time. So they might see their teachers sometimes as their friends, but they also see them as their very respectful figure, someone they have to respect, of course. But on the other hand, what I could notice in the Czech Republic is that they are very strict. I don't know what the case is in Hong Kong, but they are very, very strict, and they focus a lot on having like little robots that need to, let me give you an example. They, of course, that is control in the classroom, that's classroom management skills. But if you're in a kindergarten in Mexico, everyone's jumping and everyone's having fun and everyone's speaking at the same time. I think that represents a lot who Mexicans are. Whereas in the Czech Republic, since they're little kids, of course they play, they want to sing, they want to do all the activities. But when it's time to listen, they do quiet and listen. And they're raising hands. And if there's a problematic kid, it's sent to the principal, to the coordinator. By Mexico, we don't have that. The kid has to stay in the classroom, and you have to find a solution to keep the student interested. I think that's one of the differences that I would find between teaching in one place and another, because it happened to me that I wanted to like play games with the kids, and the other teachers were like, no, that's too much. We don't do that here. Just no. So I would say that's the difference that I could find, or I was able to find firsthand.
Thank you. I think to some extent it's quite similar to the case in Hong Kong. Yeah, when you talk about the straight things, I'm thinking of the second questions on the parents' expectations. You know, we students are very curious at whether the parents have as high an expectations for children learning English, you know, in Czech as that in Hong Kong.
Well, in this case, we're talking about two very different situations, because the school where I was working in the Czech Republic was a school that would select the students at very early stages according to their capacity to learn languages. Something that is very striking to me is how the students in elementary schools specifically can go to very specific domains according to their capacities and competencies, and they're placed in certain schools. So say, for example, this school, what their specialty was to teach languages. There are some other schools called gymnasiums. So the students were practicing gymnastics, sports. There were some others focused on math, on science. So they're specializing their kids since very early stages. So my students in that case, and the Czech Republic, of course, had that quality, or had that, they knew, or they were able to perform well at this level. And I think they had the parents' interest in the students learning English was high, because for some reason they were in that school. It was a public school, I need to mention this. In Mexico, however, there is a big difference, because the program is barely starting in public education. I'm not sure if many teachers are teaching English in public schools now, in public kindergartens. There are few who have started. I've heard of some. But I think since it is so new, parents are mainly happy with whatever English they're giving, because this is the first time we're experiencing this. So they are not really, they don't really want you to teach a curriculum, a syllabus. They're not paying attention to what it's been done. And I'm talking, again, in public education. So they are happy if their students receive English, because I think most parents nowadays are aware of the importance of English as a language, as a lingua franca in the world, and that they are happy that their students are learning. I mean, that their children are learning. In the Czech Republic, of course, these programs have been running for a long time. So I would say they're paying more attention to the curriculum, to the syllabus, to what the teachers do. But I would say that they were happy with the results that they had specifically in that class where, in that school where I was teaching. So I hope that I'm answering your question here.
Yes, you did. Thank you. Yeah. Actually, I asking for my students. They have been preparing these questions before the talk. But is there any more questions that you have and you want to take this opportunity to ask Mr. Otavio? Yes, yes.
Hello. I want to ask, you said that in Mexico's classroom, the students will jumping around, they will be very happy playing games. So I wanted to ask, what if they don't follow the rules you set? How will you tackle this problem? And at the same time, you won't ruin the atmospheres and they can still keep happy. Thank you.
All teachers are really anxious, you know, how to manage discipline at the same time maintaining.
Yes, I think that's one of the big challenges we all face when we go into a classroom. It doesn't matter if it's kindergarten, primary, secondary, even university. I think we all face the problem of classroom management. So I think it's a very, very good question, and hopefully I'll be able to understand it. I said that our students in Mexico, given the culture the way we are, that we're always talking, that we're always making jokes. That's even reflected in universities. You can see it all the time. Students telling some jokes in the middle of a class. That's normal since we start. So I think I have seen very good teachers in kindergarten that have good control of their students. So it all depends, I think, and it all happens in the first week of teaching. When you tell your students what the expectations are, but also what the rules are. I think if you read it, if you go through a book, you'll find this. Set the rules in the first week and you'll be ready to go. But when we go into practice, and I think that's why you might be asking this question, because probably you have seen it or experienced it, and you want to cope with it in a better way. I don't know if that's the situation, but it happened to me. And I think, as I said, attention getters are super important, but the first thing is engagement. You need to engage students. So take advantage of the way or their willingness and their nature to be active learners and to use that energy into an interesting activity that involves their listening skills, their paying attention through the three learning skills. If we include kinesthetic, visual, and audio activities, I think students will be more engaged. So engagement is an important thing. As I mentioned before, visuals are super important as well to keep them attracted. And of course, always consider the span, the attention span of your students. So you need to be changing from time to time, not the activity itself, because maybe you want to complete a whole thing, a project, but if we break it down and give them little tasks that are interesting, appealing, and that uses that energy into the project, I think you're gonna avoid having misbehaving classes and noisy classes. And again, I think it's very, very important what you do the first weeks and you say, this is how we work, let's do it, and probably even practice it. If you practice with them, the attention getters, the rules, how to sit down, how to raise your hand, I think you can avoid all those things. And again, don't make it an imposition. Use their natural way of learning and of being and put it into activities. I think that's the best thing you can do. But that's just my opinion.
Thanks very much. I think that's really very helpful. And that's all relate to all your previous tips on making the communication, solving the communication breakdown and making things meaningful to young children. Then if they find it meaningful, they can be engaged. And then that solves, the problem of discipline. Yeah, and how I wish we can have an actual physical sharing, and you can go into the Hong Kong classroom and share with the teachers as well. Okay, so may I invite our students, even though it's quite far apart, but we show our appreciation by, yeah, thanks very much. Even though it's a very short encounter, but it's very helpful and encouraging to our pre-service students, in painting the picture and also giving them some encouraging tips to manage, the classroom. Thanks very much, Otavio. I hope we have some more chances to meet each other in some other ways. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Hopefully there will be more collaborations.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I want to thank you very much for this opportunity. Have a wonderful day in Hong Kong. It's time for us to go to bed, but thank you very much for listening to me and for this opportunity again.
Thank you. Thank you. How to say goodbye in Mexico?
Adios.
Adios.